She's not waking up, is she? That was the first thing Raymond Freeman whispered, standing there like a statue in the corner of the ICU, staring at his only daughter, a tangle of tubes, wires, and bruises. Her name was Jada, 21, senior at Emory College, future community leader, fire in her heart, courage in her voice. And now, she was a lifeless form hooked to machines that beeped in rhythm with a breath she could no longer take on her own. How? Why? What the hell happened? Just 48 hours earlier, Jada had been standing tall in downtown Atlanta, leading a peaceful march for justice. She had a megaphone in one hand, a protest banner in the other, and a crowd of young people following her voice like a lighthouse in a storm. She wasn't violent. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't even on the front lines when it happened. And yet, somewhere behind a line of patrol cars where no live streams could see, no journalists could record, 4 police officers dragged her out of sight and beat her unconscious. Let that sink in. They didn't arrest her. They didn't restrain her. They beat her into a coma. And when they walked away, they didn't file a report. They didn't explain it to anyone. No badge numbers were cited. No body cams were released. The department claimed it was an incident under review. The news? They barely said her name. To them, she was just another activist caught in the chaos. But what they didn't know, what they never even bothered to ask, was who her father was. You see, Raymond Freeman wasn't just any grieving parent. He wasn't some man with a poster screaming outside City Hall. He didn't have a Twitter account or a lawyer on speed dial. No, Raymond was a man who had disappeared from the system over a decade ago. He had once worked for the NSA, the side of it the public never saw. Cyber ops, deep field digital warfare, the kind of operations where no names were used and no traces were left. Back then, Raymond was a ghost. A digital phantom who could shut down power grids, crack satellite streams, hijack military feeds, all without ever stepping outside his front door. And then one day, he walked away, left it all behind, burned every file, erased every fingerprint, and vanished. For what? For her. For Jada. She was just 9 when her mother died. He raised her alone in a quiet suburb outside Atlanta, hiding the weight of his past behind neutral clothes and polite nods to the neighbors. No one asked questions. No one ever guessed. Raymond had become ordinary by design. Vanilla. Forgettable. And he was fine with that, as long as Jada got to live out loud. She was everything he wasn't. Light where he was shadow. Voice where he was silence. And now, she was silent too. Her face, so swollen, so broken. The nurses had cleaned her up, but they couldn't hide what had been done. Her jaw was fractured. Her skull showed signs of trauma. She had bruises on her ribs. There were fingernail marks on her wrists. She didn't fall. She wasn't trampled. They did this. Deliberately. Violently. Quietly. And now they were hoping the story would die before she did. Raymond sat down beside her bed. Didn't cry. Didn't shake. Just stared. Watched the slow rise and fall of her chest under the ventilator. He had spent his life learning how to break into the most secure systems in the world. But sitting there, he had never felt more helpless. Until the anger started to settle. Until the silence around her began to sound like war drums. Until the cold, calculating part of his mind, the one he had locked away for good, began to come back online. The police wanted the world to think Jada's story was over, that her chapter had closed with a strike of a baton. But they made one fatal mistake. They left her father breathing. And Raymond Freeman? He wasn't going to file a complaint. He wasn't going to start a hashtag. He was going to bring down the entire damn system. The world didn't hear the moment Raymond Freeman activated. There was no sound, no warning, no broadcast, just the quiet click of a hidden floor panel beneath a dusty shelf in the back hallway of his house. It creaked, once like a coffin cracking open, and beneath it lay the past, a flat steel case, matte black, cold to the touch, untouched for years. But when he opened it, the air itself seemed to shift. Inside wasn't a weapon. It was a machine, a custom-built military-grade laptop. No brand, no serial number, no trace, built for one purpose, control. Raymond sat down in the center of his dimly lit home office. 3 locks clicked shut behind him. He powered the device on. No logos, No loading bars, just a black screen and a blinking cursor. Waiting. Access code required. And, oh, did he have a code? What spilled from his fingers wasn't a password. It was a digital incantation. 37 characters long. Special keys. Unicode. Sequences that would short out most civilian systems. The machine didn't blink. It opened instantly. And just like that, the ghost was back inside the firewall. Raymond's screen displayed nothing flashy. Just lines of code. Access logs. Directories. File trees. But to him, it was a language. His language. He hadn't touched this world since Jada was a child. He promised himself he never would again. But promises were luxuries. And after seeing his daughter clinging to life by a thread, luxuries no longer applied. They thought they were dealing with a grieving father. They were dealing with a man who once shut down a European intelligence agency's surveillance hub from a Motel 6. They had no idea. And now, he had a reason. He started with Atlanta PD's internal systems. Not the public website. Not the civilian complaint portal. He didn't waste time there. He mapped their network. Located off-site servers. Noted firewall types. And then he smiled just slightly. Because years ago, when Jada first began attending protests, he'd quietly mapped the department structure. Just in case. Back then, it was just instinct. Now it was salvation. He ran a passive scan first. Quiet. Invisible. He didn't trip any alarms. The back door he found? Buried in a subcontracted vendor's outdated access point. Sloppy. Forgotten. Perfect. He entered. One layer at a time. No brute force. No smash and grab. This was surgery. Inside, he found the bones. Badge ID logs. Body cam metadata. GPS pings. Access timestamps. Internal chat archive. It was all there. And all rot. He wasn't looking for revenge. Not yet. He was looking for proof. Names. The men and women who had taken Jada behind those cars. The ones who made sure no camera was rolling when they broke her face. Within hours, 4 names surfaced from the dark. Sergeant Carter Voss. Officer Blake Marin. Officer Chelsea Niles. Officer Jamal Briggs. Each one had been on duty that day. Each one had a digital footprint stamped in time. Each one had gaps in their body cam logs. Or none at all. And then he found it. An audio file. Hidden. Poorly named. Buried in an untagged subdirectory. He listened. She ain't moving. That'll teach him. Click. End of recording. No remorse. No panique. Just cruelty. Clean. Casual. Like tossing out trash. Raymond sat still for a long time. Then he copied the file. Backed it up. Labeled it Detonator_1. He wasn't angry anymore. Not the kind of anger that screams or breaks glass. This was different. This was war, whispered in binary. And the officers who thought they'd gotten away with a crime, they didn't even realize the walls were already cracking around them. Because Raymond wasn't chasing them in the streets. He was already inside their walls. Watching, collecting, building the architecture of their collapse, one keystroke at a time. And in that silent room where the lights never changed and the door never opened, the real story began. The podium was polished. The chief's suit was sharp. The cameras were rolling. And just like that, the lie began. Less than 24 hours after Jada Freeman was left bloodied and broken in the ICU, the Atlanta Police Department held a press conference. It was a performance. American flag to the left. Georgia seal behind. A sea of officers flanking the stage like statues. And at the center, Chief Emery Wells. 30 years in uniform. 10 behind a desk. Face like carved stone, voice like Sunday morning sermon. He leaned into the mic and said words he'd said before. Words he'd been trained to deliver. We regret the unfortunate events during yesterday's demonstration. Unfortunate. Like a flat tire. Like a weather delay. He spoke of crowd escalation. Of officers responding appropriately. Of a plastic bottle thrown from somewhere. He never said who. Never said why. Just enough fog to cover the blood. And then, he said her name. Jada Freeman was involved in a physical altercation and resisted police efforts to detain her. Resisted. As if she'd been swinging fists. As if 4 grown officers had no choice but to beat a college student into a coma. But the worst came next. Body cam footage is currently under review. That phrase, so hollow, so familiar. A placeholder. A way to stretch out the silence while the truth is buried. Raymond watched it all from Jada's hospital room. The screen was muted, but he didn't need sound. He'd read enough lips in war zones to know when lies were being weaponized. Outside the hospital, headlines multiplied like spores. Protester injured in clash with police. Activist hospitalized after confrontation. Tensions rise following scuffle at city protest. No mention of the coma. No footage of the moment. Just passive language and polite deflection. It was happening again. The script. The one used every time someone in uniform crossed the line. Watered down. Shift the blame. Control the optics. But what they didn't realize, what no one realized, was that the camera they should have worried about wasn't one on a cop's chest. It was the one Raymond Freeman had aimed straight at their system. He stood by the hospital window, arms folded, watching the screen as his daughter remained motionless behind him. Her face, still pale, still broken, but alive. And that meant they hadn't finished the job. He didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't argue with the television. He just turned it off, because now he had everything he needed. The department had made their move, and it was textbook corruption. Now it was his turn. He sat back down at his laptop, the untraceable black slab humming softly like a predator in a low growl. The police thought they were working against time, trying to outpace outrage, delay footage, dodge public scrutiny. But Raymond? He wasn't working against time. He was using it. Every second they lied, he pulled another thread. Every breath they wasted on rehearsed statements, he mapped another access point. He wasn't just hacking a network, he was weaving a noose. And he wasn't going to hang just one neck. He was going to collapse the entire system. Because this wasn't about one cop, or one night, or even one daughter. This was about the machine that made it all possible. The machine that called her defiance a threat, that framed her bruises as resistance, that spoke of her trauma like it was unfortunate and inconvenient. No, they didn't get to do that. Not this time. Because behind the curtain of this broken system, a ghost had returned. And he wasn't interested in protests. He wasn't there to beg for justice. He came to burn. Rothidus in Kvit Foldas. That's the first thing Raymond Freeman remembered as his fingers moved across the keyboard. Not like a man typing, but like a surgeon dissecting a tumor. He wasn't here to guess. He was here to expose. The officers who dragged Jada behind those squad cars didn't leave a trail of blood. They left data. And data doesn't lie. One by one, the pieces fell into place. Sergeant Carter Voss, a 19-year veteran, riot control experience. Officer Blake Marin, mid-30s, badge complaints sealed behind administrative closure. Officer Chelsea Niles, Payard Dolling, featured in diversity campaigns. Behind closed doors, something else entirely. Officer Jamal Briggs, quiet, no history, but that's what bothered Raymond most. Silence. He wasn't just looking for names. He was looking for patterns. Every system leaves fingerprints, and the Atlanta PD's internal logs were crawling with them. Raymond cross-referenced badge swipes at precinct doors, GPS logs from squad cruisers, body cam metadata, and upload timestamps from cloud backups. The picture started to take shape. Voss had arrived on scene 10 minutes before the protest escalated. Marin's body cam showed exactly 9 minutes of corrupted footage. Niles accessed 2 separate logins from different devices, one from the riot line, one from a personal phone, hours later. Briggs claimed his body cam malfunctioned. And then, bingo, buried deep inside a raw directory backup, one not meant to be seen, Raymond found an uncompressed audio file. No label, just random characters for a file name. He clicked play. Low wind, distant yelling. Voice 1, Marin, she ain't moving. Voice 2, unclear chuckle. Voice 1 again, that'll teach him. Silence. Raymond sat motionless. Then he rewound, played it again, and again. There was no remorse, no urgency, just a voice casually describing what they'd done to his daughter, like it was a job well done. That was it. The moment the mission changed. This wasn't about infiltration anymore. This wasn't even about exposure. This was about reckoning. He copied the file, labeled it detonator_1, saved a timestamp, synced it to a remote server. filed it under a sequence he hadn't touched in 11 years. And then he went deeper. Each officer had private cloud folders, meant for internal training logs, badge reviews, shift reports. But Raymond found something else. Personal backups. Officer Blake Marin had synced an entire alternate phone to a hidden folder. An old cloud account. Forgotten. Untouched. Most of it looked normal. Pictures with his kids, text chains with coworkers. But then, a second folder, labeled with a string of random numbers. Inside, screenshots, shalog, videos, conversations with a woman not his wife, hotel receipts, graphic photos, late-night confessions filled with guilt and addiction and self-pity. And then, a second affair. Different woman. Younger. Much younger. The text began around the time of a traffic stop. At first, warnings. Then comfort. Then compliments. And then something else. She was 17. The messages told the rest. A flurry of texts at 2:13 a.m. Selfies. Promises. A hotel confirmation. Raymond's pulse didn't rise. He didn't curse. He didn't look away. He just saved it. Every file. Every word. Every timestamp. Then turned to Chelsea Niles. She was careful. Encrypted messages. Alternate logins. Multilayer passwords. But not careful enough. A backup sync from a public school safety app captured her group chat history. A mistake. One she never noticed. Raymond opened the file. Group name? Locker room laughs. A thread between officers. Dozens of them. Memes. Sarcastic commentary. Mockery of citizens and victims. And then, he saw Jada's name. A screenshot from her live stream, hours before the protest. And under it, Chelsea Niles typed, "Hood rat with a death wish." Another officer replied with laughing emojis. Another added, "She'll shut up eventually." Raymond stared at the words. Not because he was shocked, because he was focused. This wasn't just police misconduct. This was contempt. Spoken behind closed doors. Typed without fear. Shared between people with power and no accountability. He copied it all. Compiled. Cross-referenced. Organized. Each folder had its own label. Ignition. Fuel. Match. And in the middle of the storm, one screen stayed open, Jada's ICU feed. She hadn't moved, but now the world was about to. Because Raymond didn't need guns. He didn't need headlines. He didn't even need the law. He had their secrets. And when the time came, he'd let the truth speak louder than any badge ever could. Destruction doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's a phone that won't unlock, a card that won't swipe, a silence that grows louder every minute. Raymond Freeman knew this well. In his world, collapse didn't start with explosions. It started with small, precise cuts. And the officers who put his daughter in a coma, they were about to feel every one of them. He began with money, because money is control. And people who think they're untouchable often forget how easily their lives are wired into numbers. The banking data Raymond had quietly harvested was more than evidence. It was access. Session tokens, login fingerprints, behavior patterns, backup credentials. All scraped, stored, and ready. He didn't need to breach the banks themselves. That would be reckless. He simply walked in wearing their digital skins. First target, Sergeant Carter Voss. Raymond redirected one of Voss's paycheck deposits, just once. Not enough to raise suspicion, just enough to vanish into a dummy charity account Raymond had built years ago for another mission. A few hours later, Voss's mortgage payment failed. Then his utilities. Then his phone auto bill. All within a 48-hour period. He called his bank. Waited on hold. Tried again. Walked in circles in his living room, muttering to himself. Raymond watched it all in real time through scraped Ring camera feeds. Second, Officer Blake Marin. Raymond triggered Marin's auto insurance withdrawal 3 times in one morning. The bank flagged it, locked his account for suspicious activity. When Marin tried to reset his password, the backup email failed authentication. Why? Because Raymond had quietly switched the security questions the night before. Marin stood in his driveway, phone pressed to his ear, pacing like a caged animal. Third, Officer Chelsea Niles. Her card was declined at a grocery store, then again at a gas station. Her Apple Pay froze mid-transaction. The alert said location mismatch, pinged from across the country. That location? A Go server Raymond had spoofed from Nevada. She tried again, failed again, called the bank, waited, hung up. Confusion slowly gave way to frustration. And then, Officer Jamal Briggs. Raymond didn't touch Briggs's accounts directly. No, he knew exactly where to strike. Child support. He reversed a single payment before it cleared. Not stolen, just stuck. The delay triggered a rent failure for Briggs's ex-partner. She called, texted, called again. The messages got angrier. The voicemails got longer. Briggs didn't know what was happening, but the pressure started to mount. None of it looked like an attack. It looked like bad luck. System errors. Bank glitches. But it wasn't. It was Raymond, taking apart their sense of control, one thread at a time. No noise. No trace. No fingerprints. Just unease. And unease turns to fear. By the third day, all 4 officers were texting each other. Raymond intercepted every word. They didn't think it was coordinated. They didn't suspect an enemy. They blamed the banks, the city. One of them even joked about Mercury being in retrograde. Raymond didn't smile, didn't gloat. This wasn't satisfaction. This was preparation. He was conditioning them, letting their worlds wobble before the real collapse began. He called it Phase 1 instability, and it was working. Officer Voss stopped showing up to the gym. Marin canceled dinner plans with his wife, too distracted. Niles messaged her supervisor about a string of personal emergencies. Briggs? He'd gone offline completely. Back in his command center, a silent, windowless room humming with the glow of 3 cold monitors. Raymond tracked every ripple. His daughter's ICU feed played in a corner. Monitors still blinking, still alive, still silent. And as he watched those responsible begin to fumble in their own shadows, he felt nothing. Not rage, not revenge, just alignment. This wasn't the punishment. This was the foundation cracking. And Raymond? He wasn't done. Because next, he wouldn't just rattle their routines. He'd drag their darkest secrets into the light. Some monsters don't hide in shadows. They wear uniforms. Raymond Freeman had seen that truth before, in classified rooms, war zones, surveillance feeds. But never like this. Never with his daughter in a coma. Now, he wasn't just watching. He was unmasking. Target 1. Officer Blake Marin. Raymond had already seen the affair. The second phone. The hotel receipts. The messages sent at 2:13 a.m. The girl, 17. Raymond didn't act out of emotion. He acted with structure. He compiled everything. Timestamps, screenshots, audio recordings, GPS matches. And then he built a digital bomb, an encrypted folder, auto-timed to self-release if intercepted. Clean, undeniable, labeled simply, property of truth. Then, he sent it to Marin's wife. It landed at 7:12 a.m., a secure file link, unmarked. Issue. She opened it cautiously, and then, hell opened. At 7:34 a.m., she went live on Facebook. The camera shook slightly as she stepped back from her laptop, tears already lining her cheeks. Her voice, furious, raw, unmistakable. This is the man you call a hero. This is the man who put a young girl in a hospital and then did this. She held up printed screenshots. Read the text aloud. Her hands trembled. Her voice cracked. And then she dropped the photos on the floor like ash. The livestream spread like wildfire. By 9 a.m., local news outlets picked it up. By noon, the affair with the minor was front-page material. And Marin? He never saw it coming. The front of his house became a magnet. Neighbors yelling. Reporters crowding the driveway. Protesters, some of them Jada's classmates, chanting his name. But not in honor. In fury. Target 2. Officer Chelsea Niles. Raymond's file was leaner, but just as lethal. He had screenshots from locker room laughs, the private group chat where officers joked about protesters, where Chelsea had typed, "Hood rat with a death wish." About Jada, Raymond didn't release it online. Not right away. Instead, he sent it directly to 3 people. A civil rights attorney, a veteran journalist known for exposing police abuse, and a black female news anchor who had once introduced Jada at a campus rally. The anchor opened the file, paused, then walked straight into the newsroom. That night, she looked directly into the camera, not as a broadcaster, but as a woman who had seen too much. And she read the message aloud. Hood rat with a death wish. Chelsea Niles, officer of the Atlanta Police Department. The room fell silent, and then the station went dark, followed by a special segment. The messages behind the badge. Social media exploded. Chelsea's name trended within the hour. Her face, once used in diversity campaigns and school visits, now floated across TikTok, Reddit, and Twitter, superimposed with her own words. Former students reposted Jada's live stream with Chelsea's insult stamped across the screen in blood-red font. Hood rat with a death wish. No espin. No saving it. Chelsea released a shaky video that night. Tearful. Hollow. Talking about private conversations taken out of context. Nobody cared. By sunrise, she resigned. No press conference. No bouvier. Just a one-line email to the department. And silence. Target 3, Officer Jamal Briggs. He hadn't said much. That was the problem. He had watched. That day. That moment. As Jada was dragged behind the cars. He stood still. Did nothing. Said nothing. His body cam footage? Lost. His statement? Didn't see clearly. Raymond didn't need a statement. He had the raw file. Briggs's body cam hadn't malfunctioned. It had been cut manually just before the assault. Raymond hijacked Briggs's own live stream to show the truth. It happened during an Instagram live. Briggs sat in a bar, trying to explain, trying to salvage his image. I didn't do anything. I wasn't part of it. I didn't know she was. And then the feed glitched. Flickered. Twice. Then the screen split. A video began to play. Briggs's body cam. The exact moment Jada was dragged out of sight. Briggs's reflection, visible in the cruiser window. Just standing there, watching, silent. The bar's music faded. The comments exploded. That's you. You stood there. You watched her go down. Briggs froze, then fumbled to end the stream. Too late. The footage had already been screen recorded, clipped, shared across platforms. By morning, hashtag he stood and watched was trending across the country. Briggs vanished from social media, and then from his house. No one knew where he went, but it didn't matter. The truth was already louder than him. Raymond watched it all unfold. No celebración. No triumph. He just watched, from a room filled with static screens and cold air. Jada's ICU feed still ran in the corner. Still no movement. But outside, the fire had started, and it wasn't going out. Not until everyone responsible was exposed. There's a line every monster refuses to cross, until they're standing on it. Sergeant Carter Voss had watched his colleagues fall like dominoes. Marin's affair exposed. Niles disgraced and gone. Briggs vaporized in public shame. But Voss? He kept his head down. Stayed silent. Thought maybe, just maybe, he could survive this storm. He was wrong. Because Raymond Freeman didn't want a press release. He wanted a confession. Not written. Not whispered. Spoken aloud. On camera. Unmistakable. And to get it, Raymond built a trap. Not with code. Not with firewalls. In the real world. It started with a text. Spoofed number. Disposable. I have everything. Come alone. No cups. 11:30 p.m. Underpass off Sinkton Road. No signature. No threat. Just bait. Raymond had picked the spot carefully. An abandoned overpass in Fairburn, fenced dark out of sight. Surrounded by industrial lots and broken concrete. No lights. No cameras. No witnesses. At least, that's what Voss thought. At exactly 11:27 p.m., a black sedan rolled into the lot. Voss stepped out, wearing civilian clothes. Hood pulled low, one hand clenched around his phone. His posture screamed paranoia, looking over his shoulder, peering into the shadows. He didn't bring a weapon, just fear, and the desperate need to take back control. What he didn't know, he was already live. Raymond had planted motion-activated 4K cameras in 3 angles around the structure. Migde, synced, auto-streamed to a dead man's Switch server. The moment Voss arrived, the feed began uploading to every platform, simultaneously. YouTube, Twitter, Telegram, TikTok, At 11:33 p.m., Voss began pacing, talking to himself, muttering, swearing, breathing heavy. And then, she pushed us. That girl thought she was untouchable. She wanted to fight. He stopped, looked around, then shouted into the dark. I'd beat her again if I had to. The sound echoed. Concrete caught every syllable. His face red, veins in his neck pulsing, and the cameras didn't flinch. They caught it all. Every single word. And then his phone buzzed. Just once. He looked down. The screen said, "Live feed uploaded." His eyes widened. His hand shook. He opened the link and saw it. Himself. Already online. Already viral. A pinned caption above the video. Unedited confession. No cuts. No edits. Watch. Share. Voss's face collapsed. Rage turned to panic. He threw the phone. It shattered. Too late. The feed was everywhere. Screens lit up across the city. Across the country. I'd beat her again if I had to. Over and over. On loop. Shared by thousands. Then millions. By morning, the world was on fire. Protests exploded across downtown Atlanta. Police HQ surrounded before sunrise. Politicians scrambling for statements. The Department of Justice issued a federal review order before noon. TV anchors struggled to keep up. And at the center of it all, Sergeant Carter Voss, the face of unrepentant brutality. And then he vanished. Neighbors said his car never returned. Mail piled up. No lights came on. The house. Silent. The curtains never moved. But Raymond, he already knew. 3 days later, officers entered the home. What they found chilled even them. No signs of struggle. Just stillness. An eerie calm. Drawers open. Pictures removed. Walls scrubbed clean. Everything erased except one room. The study. On the desk. A handwritten letter. 3 pages. The first line? They turned my own words into a weapon. It wasn't a confession. Not really. It was a collapse. The unraveling of a man who had lived behind the badge and could no longer live without it. They found him in the same room. Seated. Cold. Gone. The headline hit every screen. Atlanta officer found dead after confession video goes viral. Comment sections ignited. Some called it justice. Others called it cowardice. But no one denied one thing. The system had cracked. And it started with Jada Freeman. Back in the ICU, the machine still hummed. Raymond never left her side. He didn't blink when the alert hit his phone. Didn't react when her attacker's face filled the news cycle again. He just sat, holding her hand. Because his war, the one fought in silence and data, was almost over. But the final page? Still unwritten. The headlines came fast now. FBI launches probe into Atlanta PD. Chief Emory Wells resigns amid leaks and protests. Justice Department confirms systemic violations. Everywhere Raymond looked, he saw the wreckage. But he didn't smile, didn't celebrate, because his war had never been about vengeance. It had been about truth, about consequence, about his daughter. And now, as the walls finally buckled, Raymond remained in the one place he'd never left. Her bedside. It had been 31 days. 31 days since 4 officers tried to silence her. 31 days since her name was nearly erased. But now, the city chanted her name. Jada Freeman had become more than a victim. She was a spark, not because she wanted to be, because the system forced her to be. The police department was crumbling from the inside. Dozens of officers suspended. Cases reopened. Internal affairs replaced by federal oversight. Community halls were full. Courtrooms overbooked. And streets, once empty at night, now filled with people again. Not in riot, in unity. And still, Raymond said nothing. No interviews. No posts. No press tours. His name never appeared. Just whispers. Just theories. Some called him a digital Robin Hood. Others called him a ghost. But the people who mattered, they knew. The ICU had become a second home. Nurses barely noticed him anymore. He kept to the same chair. Hands folded. Eyes always on her. Some days, her hand would twitch. Her breath would catch. But nothing stayed. Until, that morning, the light cut differently through the blinds. Warm. Still. The machines beeped in rhythm. Raymond was scrolling headlines. Another officer indicted. Another leak confirmed. Another system broken open. And then, a shift. The smallest breath. A flutter in her eyelids. A tremble in her fingers. He looked up. Waited. It happened again. The monitor beeped once. Then twice. Then faster. And then, Jada Freeman opened her eyes. At first, it didn't focus. Didn't know where to land. She blinked against the light. Jaw twitching. Chest rising. No words. Just life. Pure. Frail. Real. Raymond stood slowly. Not breathing. Not daring to break the moment. Her gaze drifted. Met his. And for a heartbeat, she didn't recognize him. Then she did. And it was enough. He stepped forward. Took her hand. She squeezed back. Weak, but certain. Outside the window, sirens echoed. Not in chaos. In transition. Protesters still filled the streets. This time not screaming. Demanding. Changing. Living. On the TV in the corner, a headline scrolled across the bottom. Federal Task Force discovers massive cover-up network in Atlanta PD. Raymond didn't look. He didn't need to. He already knew how this story ended. He leaned closer to her. His voice was barely above a whisper. You came back. A flicker of a smile. Barely visible, but real. She was alive. And everything he did was worth it. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of something honest. And finally, justice had a face.